All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bailey Brett, and joined with me is the captain, seemingly in a sauna, Mr. Andy Full. What's going on, buddy?
Sweltering day on the water. That's all I'm going to say, sweltering. And I feel like it's carried over into the upstairs of my house.
He does rise, my friend.
Whew, I can feel it like dripping off my mustache. It's pretty gross.
Good God, we did not need that description.
Sweaty.
But it feels like it's been a while since we gotten you on. Since the two of us have been on.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks because you were gone and then I was gone, and all kinds of funness.
For the folks, how was your Florida trip?
Florida was warm, like 90 and sunny every day, but
was it sweltering?
It was sweltering, yes. Got a nice tan, didn't get burned, came back, got right on the water with you. That was pretty fun after our plane got hit by lightning on the way home. That was pretty exciting.
You're a survivor.
Yes, a survivor, which daily random fact, plane a day gets hit around the world with lightning, so they don't crash all too much. So that's good. But no, it was fun. Glad to be home. Glad to be back on the lake, except for the fish have gone into a weird funk, and I think they're getting ready to mate and get up on beds, even though the water is like ice cold. So it's weird. Like the 2 and 3 pound males that I'm catching in the river are peeing. So yeah, it's like, what the heck?
Doing the
water's 46 degrees. You're not supposed to be doing this yet.
So you're saying bass fishing is getting R-rated already?
Yeah, I think in the coming days it will be R-rated, big time. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you had a fun day with our buddy old Brandon Lewis.
Yeah, he stuck it out. Tough morning, but then we got into a really fun largemouth bite that not too many people get to experience on Lake Erie. There's like a 2-week window. It's really good. So hope to get in there and do it again in the next couple days.
Yeah. Sounds like he got to see the goods that I think will be very rare occasion if you take any other clients.
Yeah, not many people are going to go back there. It's not an easy place to fish. So it's fun.
What I think I banged my boat all the way to St. Clair by Garrett and went to the backwaters of St. Clair is what you're saying.
Pretty much. I went over the Fort Erie Bridge and down the QEW and launched over in Canada,
Yeah.
And now I'm back here just in time.
Well, perfect. Just in time for Tuesday Night Live with one of our good buddies. We're getting back on the show. I think it's like Garrett's 3rd or 4th time on the show. And tonight we're talking about a topic that I personally love because I love the postpawn, because at the time where those fish really start getting offshore heavy, and that's where, electronics play into it. And that's where, I personally love fishing the most is when they're offshore and they're just firing because they're coming off the bed. They're hungry and they eat everything in front of their face, especially like that first week or two. And our buddy, Mr. Garrett Paquette, is really good, I think, at finding them postpawn. He's really good with electronics. I am obsessed with his Instagram screenshots of his graph. We'll get into that in a second here. I'm sure we've talked about it before, but I think without further ado, we need to bring him on here. Mr. Garrett Paquette, what's going on, buddy?
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Glad to be back. Welcome. Yeah, I think this is my 3rd time. Before we say anything, I'm going to lose my train of thought. Andrew, I was out on St. Clair today on an epic swim bait bite for the first 3 hours, and the fish literally cut off and did exactly what you said. They're thinking about spawning. They're not spawning, but they're in that phase where you cannot get them to bite, and I absolutely hate it, and I don't want to go fishing tomorrow, but I have to. So here I am.
Well, yeah, I feel your pain. It's kind of wild. Like last Monday, we had an epic swim bait jerkbait bite, and I left for Florida. And I come home, and me and Bailey go fish a mud hole and catch them on spinner baits and largemouth. I'm like, oh, that was fun for a couple hours. Then I took Sunday off because of Mother's Day, and I get out, and I'm like, oh, we're going to smash them. The water temp only went up 1 degree. Throwing swim baits the first hour, never got bumped. And I'm like, what the heck? And we had to go real slow and load Ned rigs, tubes, and just like dragging it like you're going to fall asleep until you just feel that so soft I'm like, oh God, they're getting ready to do the dirty. Then I caught the first male and it was peeing everywhere, and I'm like, this is stupid.
Yeah, it is. I truly think it's funny we're talking about post-spawn fishing, because when I was young and I read books about bass fishing, everyone always talked about how much they hated the post-spawn. It was the worst time of the year to fish, whatever. And I think with technology now, we've kind of, learned a lot of techniques and a lot of ways to find these fish and catch them. And I think, Bailey, you said it's your favorite time to fish. It's one of my favorite times, probably my favorite time as well. But I think the time right when they're about to spawn, when they're thinking about it, to me, it is absolutely the worst time to fish. I either run, there's either two things for me to do, and it's not to stay in that area. I'm either going for warmer water for fish that are spawning, or I'm going for colder water for fish that are more in the pre-spawn. I will leave that area instantly once I realize that's going on, because I'm not saying you won't catch a fish here and there, but your chances are so slim. To me, it's worth running across the lake to try to find something different. It's just they're the hardest fish to catch. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, I agree. I'd find like that first place that's going to have spawners and just go looking for them, get up and start trying to look at them instead of, play around with them in that pre-spawn phase where they're just being weird.
Yeah, and you'll see the biggest fish in the lake, but they won't bite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You'll see them like they're there and they just won't touch anything, and it'll confuse the heck out of you. And I guess it's like, if you don't have a tournament, it's probably a good time to really start getting weird with them and just trying some wacky stuff that no one else is doing. But do you find that with smallmouth than largemouth? That's questions to either of you guys, because
for that, I think it's I think it's a little easier with smallmouth because they're a more aggressive fish by nature. But like I said, if I'm in that situation and I can see, like, smallmouth is not as visual, right? Largemouth, like when this is happening, they're on the bank. You can look around, like there's 4 and 5 pounders everywhere. Why aren't they biting? The water's in the 60s. The smallmouth, it's tricky because it happens and you don't see it. You kind of just have to feel for it. Or like you said, you caught one peeing, like that was kind of your tip that like that's happening. For me, the smallmouth is tricky because you don't see it. But in both cases, like I said, I am super against trying to fish in that phase, unless you have just a little tiny lake where the water temp is the same throughout and every single fish is doing the same thing. I am moving and I'm looking for fish that are either earlier in the stage or they've already locked onto beds and I can catch them that way. But I'm out if it is happening and every fish seems to be doing that. For me, it's finesse fishing. Like maybe it's wacky Cinco, or I'll even go later than that. I'll go super small worms, wacky rigs, stuff like that, really light line, just something to try to get a bite. But you just got to be prepared that it's going to be a really tricky time to catch fish.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into the chunk of today's show of like following fish off the bed, that where Andy and Garrett, what we're going to experience here in probably like 3 to 4 weeks, heavily. Following these fish off the bed into that full-blown post-spawn phase. Before we get into that, our buddy Mr. Tyler Berger sent me a text this morning because he saw you coming on the show, and he told me to ask you to tell us about your co-angler story of either he was puking or going bathroom off your boat.
Okay. I might have to tell a shortened version because the long one takes too long. And it's funny, I was actually out there with the owners of Big Bite today on St. Clair, and I told the story, and it's good every time. So anyways, I don't want to get into a lot of details because I don't want to give away an identity. I was on a ledge tournament back in the day, running KBD's old boat, super beat up. There's wires everywhere. It wouldn't run fast. And we were in this ledge tournament. I was here racing to spots, and we couldn't get to any spot. Finally got on a spot, started fishing. It was just kind of like a weird day. Like there was a bunch of Asian carp in the area, and he was literally fishing for him with a top water, and I was fishing a football jig, and I had 20 pounds. And he didn't have a bite. And I tell him, I'm like, hey man, let's run back. We're like 30 miles away. I got a spot like 10 minutes from the ramp. I want to fish it for like 10 minutes and we'll run in early. I got a good bag. He's like, all right, cool. So we run back. I get to the spot, jump up on the front deck. He jumps up on the back deck really quick. I'm like, yeah, this guy's excited to fish. Like, we got 10 minutes. Hopefully he gets one. I take a cast of there with crankbait, burn my crankbait in. I look behind me and he's sitting there in his boxers, just his boxers. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, dude, I had an accident. And I'm like, huh? And I look on the back deck. I thought he puked over the whole back deck because it was covered and it wasn't puke. It was the other thing you can do to have an accident.
God.
So this happens, and I'm like, I'm still in tournament mode. So I'm like, all right, like, I just got to keep fishing. Just, hey, we got 10 minutes. We'll figure it out. So I throw my crankbait back out there again. I'm reeling it. Postspawn fish, by the way, follow them over. We'll talk about it in 5 minutes. I'm burning my crankbait back out, or burning it in. One bites it. I hook him. He's like, you need the net? I'm like, no, dude, please just stay back there. It jumps.
Stay back.
And it jumps, and it's like a 4-pounder. I'm like, actually, you know what? If you could net this fish, this is going to help me out. So I'm like, I'm focused on the fish. I'm reeling it in. I get close, and I kind of feel him next to me. I look over. He is completely naked with the net in his hands. I swear to you, this is a true story.
Shooting the net.
Nets the fish, puts it in, gets it in. I'm in the back, like literally like this in the live well, like trying to call, get out my small. Obviously, the back deck is destroyed at this point.
Oh, God.
Throwing back my small fish, throwing the bigger one, and
Yikes.
get all that done. And now at this point, like my mind is, I'm out of it at this point. But he sat there for 10 minutes, which is actually really good. He put his boxers in the water and clean off the back deck, put it in, clean off the back deck. And literally, we were in the main channel doing like 80 boats in this tournament, ran like within 100 yards of us and saw the whole thing. So it was just unbelievable. And there's so much more to the story, but that's a shortened version. Yeah, it's like, it was such a surreal day. And like, it's crazy that it happened to me because like, it just is like a part of my life. But when I tell that story, I realize like, you literally will never beat that as a co-angler story. Like that's king. So
new meaning to the poop deck.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Props to him
it
though, for still netting your fish.
It was I mean he handled it well. He's like, it's like he's been there 15 times. Like, let's just go on with the day and catch fish, and that's what we did. So it was it was funny. It was a good one.
Now I'm intrigued about the long form of the story. Like,
yeah, the long form really good, but we probably shouldn't do it over internet because people can stuff and then we'll good.
Yeah, nobody needs that going around. I wouldn't want that going around about me. Good gosh, the poor dude. I mean,
yeah. Hopefully he's all right.
Yeah, no, he's actually, it's funny. We actually talk every now and then, so it's all good. It was just a weird day.
At least he cleaned it up.
Would you let him out on your boat again? Is the question.
Would I let him on my boat again? I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah.
Would you let him on your boat again? I'd make my best judgment in the morning.
Oh gosh, that's funny. All right. Co-angler stories aside, let's start getting into today's show. Thank you to Ty for texting me to ask that. It sounded like it was a funny story, but I didn't realize the weight that story carried.
Sure.
Literally.
Like, we're going to have to do a podcast about the story, an hour block for the story. Maybe we'll do that next month or something.
Oh,
maybe we'll have to set something up like that. Maybe that's a episode 300. We get you on to talk about it.
We can do that.
All right.
Because like if I give away all the details, it's 100 times better. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. So yeah, just mark your calendar. Episode 300. We're getting you on to talk about that story.
All right. Deal.
All right. So talking post-spawn, when fish are really heavily leaving the bed, and we all know there's certain areas that'll have spawners longer than others. Basically, what we're trying to do, we're talking, the majority of the time when the majority of the fish leave. We're not talking, the exceptions where some fish hang around longer than others. So when spawn is happening, you're starting to see some fish leave the bed. Beds are starting to get deserted. You're up shallow looking for them, visually, right? And you're realizing that's not the deal. What is your first move that you make?
Yeah. So, and I'll say you kind of like messed up what I was going to say by saying we're talking about the majority of fish. Because I want to go over this real quick because this is what's cool about the post-spawn period. Yes, a lot of the fish are going to be going towards the main lake, or if your body of water has it, current. Current is number one. And in a reservoir, the most current is always in the main river, in the main river channel. That's why the fish, they start migrating towards those ledges. In Lake St. Clair, it might be where the river channel dumps in. Every system's a little different. But if you have current, fish are going to go to current after they spawn. Now, in a natural lake, of course, we might not have current. and we'll talk about that. But remember that fish are going towards current. But the post spawn is interesting because there's a lot of fish moving deep, yes, towards their summering holes, but there's a lot of fish who get caught up on bait fish spawns. You have the bluegill spawn that's going to happen right after. You have the shad spawn, herring spawn. If your lakes have those bait fish, and that's something to always look out for. Like don't like the shad and the herring thing. Obviously, like if you guys don't know, it happens at night or in low light conditions, and it's kind of it's like hit or miss. Like you can't go out there and be like, I'm gonna find a shad spawn. I'm going to this marina and I'm gonna find it. Like it's something that you just kind of stumble upon. But if you come across it, like it's something to have in your arsenal, I think, in the post spawn. Like that's an easy way to catch a bunch of fish quick. They're feeding, they're aggressive. That's something you want to look for. And the same thing with the bluegill spawn. To me, the bluegill spawn's even better because it happens all day, and it actually probably gets better, as the sun gets up and things get hot. So like you don't miss out on anything. You have a lot of opportunity to catch fish off those. Those are things to look for during this time. Not that's going to be your whole day. I mean, you could have a day where you're running just bluegill beds, but it's just a way to to catch a couple fish throughout your day. Or if you're going and trying to fish like deep brush piles, it's like it's not really working. Go up there, fish a stretch of bluegill beds, catch one or two, go back offshore. Like the post spawn kind of gets like that, where you're going to have to kind of mix it up and kind of get back to what I was saying. If you've watched tournaments in this time of year, elite tournaments, major league fishing, if you look at the top 10, there'll be like 8 or 9 different presentations used for those 10 anglers. Like it is wide open across the board. And it's neat because like it's the time of the year where if you find something, I feel like you have a chance to have it more to yourself. Like, I've had some really good early post spawn tournaments fishing offshore because there was fish still spawning. Guys had them going like crazy on a frog. Guys had them on a shad spawn. And it just spreads everybody out. It's not one of those summer tournaments or a pre-spawn tournament where guys are like, I have to do this. And you got 100 guys on the water or whatever. If you're on a lake with 500 recreational fishermen, not everyone is clued in on let's do this. That's where the fish are. It's a time of year where, 10% of the fish are doing this, 20% are doing this, 30% is doing this. And it's a good time to fish. I mean, the fish aren't as pressured, not saying like there's not as many guys out there fishing, but that section of fish or that phase of fish you're going for, it's probably the least pressured it's going to be all season, unless your lakes freeze like ours do and no one's fishing for them.
Yeah. That's probably the most fun part is you can do, 200 different things throughout the day. Like, and that post spawn bite is like you get on the water at sunrise, you will catch them as good as you caught. Like there's no defining hour. I mean, sure, a shad spawn could be fun, but you can catch them straight from sunrise to sunset during that time.
For sure. And on like, that's like your textbook time to throw topwaters. It's not, you don't have to get out there and throw it in the first 30 minutes and put it down. Like they will bite it all day long. Whatever you're going to do for that day, it usually happens all day long. So yeah, it's a, like we were saying, I mean, it's a super great time to be out there and, good time to go fishing the boat.
That topwater bite, especially when they're right off the bed and it's like kind of that phase where your grass is starting to grow pretty good too. Like those first clumps, like right outside of that spawning area, you can like, it doesn't matter if it's like the complete opposite of what your quote unquote textbook topwater, condition should be. It could be glass calm and sunny and it's noon. So it's literally sun's right above you. They will cannonball those topwaters. And it is so much fun because especially in the clear water lakes, you can watch them coming from a mile away.
Yeah. And that is so cool. That's so perfect. You said that because I actually brought something to speak specifically about that. And I'll preface this by saying I would never talk about this if I wasn't sponsored by Spro, because I'd keep this bait a secret from you guys because I'm like that. This is a Spro E-Pop. It's a new popper bait that came out with last year, and it's doesn't really look like a whole. Yeah, this is obviously a bluegill pattern up north. Bluegill is king, just translucent. But yeah. So no, this is the deal. Okay, so hang on to that. So these are my 2 favorite topwaters, pretty much, or were. This is a little Rico popper. You guys are probably familiar with that. It's just a real quiet, subtle topwater. And then this is the one knocker spook. This thing's famous. Everyone throws that super loud. So
Oh, yeah.
Spro, and I don't think they're meant to do this. They pretty
What
much
is that
made
bait called
something.
again?
This is a Spro E-Pop 80.
E-pop. Okay.
So I don't think they meant to do this, but they pretty much combined the two. You got the popper mouth, but it's almost like a supersized popper, smaller than the spook, but it has not quite a one knocker, but this is a extremely loud for a popping style bait. And this thing in open water, like I probably am not throwing this in 6 inches of water on a summer day, but in open water when you want to call something up to get bites, this Spro popper it's truly been unbelievable. Like I've crushed them at Champlain and Oneida on it, back home, for open water situations. And a lot of times like post spawn, like slow is better. That's why I like going with the popper style bait, because it makes me have to fish it slow. I'm still walking the bait, but I don't want the bait to just, walk like crazy. I want it to be slow, kind of just like, you almost got to be more patient than the fish to get the bites. And that thing is absolutely killer that time of year. If you're fishing, in an area where you can throw a walking bait or a popper and it's a little bit open and you got to call in a fish, that bait has been money for me the last year and a half.
Well, so that pattern you had on that E-pop, that is so that's something I've been pondering recently too, and I'm curious if you guys think it matters. But right in that post spawn, typically those bluegills are making their way up there. If not, they're doing their thing, kind of could cross over with bass. But do you guys think it matters if you throw just like normal shad patterns around that, or do you think it pays to be throwing bluegill pattern topwaters or just baits in general?
I personally think it's kind of important to throw the bluegill. Like my two post-spawn poppers is a popping frog and killer gill Spro, or an all black little popper along a bluegill spawn. Because when those bluegill are spawning, they're like black usually. Yeah. So I like a little black popper, and that just seems to get better bites.
Yeah,
that
even
color,
bright sun.
Yeah, that color frog that you just held up, Garrett, that is, I think I own like 30 of those, and then like 2 of white and 2 of black, because I throw that all year round. Like obviously not in the cold temps, but like
best frog ever.
You can use it in dirty water. You can use it in clear water. Like I literally remember going to one of our lakes around here last year in New York when they just pulled up and they were on beds, and there was a 6-pounder on bed, crystal clear water, and I just flipped that killer gill over on top of it just to see what it would do, and just comes up, and it's so much fun. Like I dropped that 7-pounder I dropped in Eufaula was in muddy water on that same color too.
Was it? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going.
No, you're good.
I'm just addicted to that frog.
Yeah. To answer the question, I think for the bluegill versus shad, to me it's always match the bait fish. So if I'm around shad, it's gonna be the whites, that pattern. If I'm on a bluegill, which we are up here a lot, it's bluegill. One thing, and this isn't like a Spro sales pitch, it's funny you even brought this up with the killer gill. To take it a step further, when you look at the mouth of these baits, I don't know what you can see here. Oh, yeah. They're orange. And whatever frog you guys like, obviously a lot of us like the Spro popping frog, but you may like a different brand, and that's fine. Try to have an orange or a chartreuse mouth. The difference of that versus your standard red, which I love a red mouth. Like a black frogs have red. A lot of frogs have a red mouth. But when you get around those bluegills, whether they're spawning or you're just in a lot of, an area with a ton of them, the orange mouth or chartreuse mouth, if the bait you're throwing has chartreuse, that makes a big difference, I've seen. So I like, the bluegill color is important, but the mouth of it, to me, I mean, there's days where that makes a difference. So if you guys can get away from your typical red or white or black and throw the orange or chartreuse in those situations, you'll get more bites. It's just that when bluegills swim off and they're scared, they flash chartreuse, they flash orange, and I think that frog and that popper, show that to those fish and trigger bites.
I've heard of some people, like, obviously you can't do this with like your black frogs, but like what they'll do with jerk baits, putting a little bit of chartreuse dot or a red dot by the front treble, that some people will do kind of like to your same point of talking about that mouth, but they'll put a little bit of like chartreuse marker or red marker right towards the mouth of like on the belly side of a frog to give fish, like if they're staring at it for a little bit, something to key in on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't do that personally, but I don't see why it would hurt. I feel like when I'm working this bait, it's kind of rolling and rocking and it's probably dipping down. So I think it's getting that idea. But yeah, if you want to throw, chartreuse or orange dot on the bottom of your baits, it's not going to hurt in my opinion.
Yeah. I feel like that's also just us way overthinking bass and giving them way too much credit.
Probably. But no, I still like in some way or shape or form. I try to get orange or chartreuse on your baits any way you can.
That's a really good point. I've always seen like the color of the mouth, but I never really thought it played that much of a factor.
If you think about it, it's one of Spro's only baits that has orange, and it's I don't want to say it's everyone's consensus favorites, but a lot of guys that have thrown that color are really high on it.
Yeah, that is for sure.
Yeah, can't beat the killer deal ever.
So obviously, when fish get done spawning, like to your point, a lot of them like to either hang shallow, find nearby laydowns.
And don't even say a lot of them. Not even a lot of them. The majority are going to move on to what we're going to talk. But just know that these are options when you're out there, because some days things are going to be tricky. There's more than one thing to do. There's plenty of options out there to catch them.
Yeah. So you basically what you did is you just answer this question by I don't stunt. What is the best way to fish open water without a fish finder or depth finder? And basically to you, what you just said is just let your, get on the bank still, let your visual cues tell you where to find those fish.
Yeah, exactly. Look for birds, look for pods of bluegill. They'll scatter. I'm sure you guys have seen it when it's really calm and like a bird flies over, you'll see a bunch of scatter and stuff on the surface. Just look for any presence where there's bait fish. I mean, nature gives out so many clues, and it's something that I used to be terrible at. I was always just like head down and fishing, and I've opened my eyes the last year and a half, and I'm like, wow, you can learn so much from just literally looking around here, looking at the water, looking at the birds, which way the wind's blowing, all that stuff makes a big difference.
That's one thing I've been trying to force myself to keep doing now that I have forward-facing sonar is to not get sucked into that.
And it's hard to do.
Oh, yeah. And you get a lot of people that just get too lost into it and kind of forget some different things. But for the fish that do move offshore, obviously, there's electronics involved, but, fisherman's intuition, what's the, gut feeling, what's the first place you're going to start looking?
Yeah. So, I'm going to try to figure out, of course, where they were spawning. And generally the biggest flat in the lake is a great place to start looking. The biggest creeks in the lake, something big where, there's gonna be a population of fish. You don't want to run up a little tiny trickle or a little tiny flat. I mean, not saying they're not going to be there, but get yourself in a big area where for sure there's fish. And for me, I'm working my way out. So I'm going to start as close to where I think they're going to spawn that I can. Like if it's a big long creek, I'm going to go to like a little pocket off of it or a branch off of it. If it's a big giant flat on an actual lake, I'm getting right there and I'm looking with my electronics. I'm starting to scan in that area. And I'm looking for a fish or a structure at this point. So there could be brush piles in the area, rock piles, grass lines, depending on what your lake has, or in the ideal situation, you start marking the fish if the bottom's clean. I mean, all fish show up on the sonar on side imaging and down imaging nowadays. And I'm just working. So I'll start right there. And if I'm not seeing them or not seeing any kind of sign of life or marking, I'm just getting closer and closer towards what I talked about earlier, which is your source of current or the main basin of the lake where I think they're going to be in the summer. And you're going to run into something between where they spawn and where that end goal for those fish is going to be. It might be, it might be 10 yards outside of where they spawn, or it might be 10 yards from where they're going to summer, but they're going to be on that path somewhere. You just got to get in there and just put in the work and follow that track out. And it's not easy. I mean, it's hard to predict where an animal is going to move, but that's just, you just have to do it. I mean, you got to put your nose down and go. But
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah. So for me, it's electronics heavy. I'm marking, I'm looking for fish. and I'm marking potential things on where I think they could sit. And if there's any, if I have any, I don't want to say doubt, whatever I'm looking for. I guess any feeling that there could be a fish, like if I mark something, I'm turning around and I'm fishing it. I'm sampling a lot of stuff. Even if I'm not seeing the fish, I'm going to stand up hundreds of times throughout the day and fish that structure, and try to get that hint. And then usually once you catch one or two, you can turn it into 5, 10, 15, 30 spots in a day, because then you know what to look for after that.
Yeah. And it could definitely be a challenge. While we say it's, a really fun time of year, when you get them coming right off the bed, it can be pretty challenging because you can find them, and it can even be a matter of hours where you'll be straight on them for 2-3 hours, and then you're completely lost, and it's because they're moving and you're still staying put. And it could be a really hard, basically a week or two of just hard transition of these fish moving, where it can get kind of confusing. But I think as long as you're able to put the pieces together in terms of looking at a map or just kind of using your visual cues where they could go, you can find, especially if you have the means to yourself, where you have the graphs and such to keep up with them. But Andy, how does that differ for you with smallmouth?
Oh, smallmouth they're almost like a completely different animal. So like in the Great Lakes situation, you have big spawning flats where they'll be. And a lot of times those spawning flats dump immediately into deep water, especially where I'm at. So they will go from 4 feet of water to 40 foot of water in literally like a day and a half at times. And then we have some fish that stay shallow and current. And there's two different fish. Like we have main lake fish, and then we have river lake fish at the mouth of Lake Erie, where those fish will stay more dependent to current in the post spawn, but the main lake fish just get right out deep and they get almost right into summer pattern. It seems like a lot of times over here, because we have so much main lake current. But it's virtually the same. You have to find the flat and then just kind of work your way out to the fish. The patterns essentially work the same. It's just you're chasing largemouth or smallmouth, and it's all generally related to the body of water you're on.
Exactly. You plug in that pattern into your body of water. And I'll kind of bridge you in the middle, because I know you're fishing, like you're saying, you're 4 to 40. Here I'm on St. Clair. You have to go 2 miles to go down 1 foot, right? It's really flat. So those fish are spawning, and they're moving out towards the main lake. But what's happening is they can't just get there in 10 feet. So they got to swim miles and miles, and they're stopping on little isolated things along the way, whether it be a boulder, a grass patch, a log, just something to kind of rest for a little bit and keep on moving. That's what I'm looking for in the post spawn. And I'll say one thing, and it goes for largemouth too, and we should have talked about it earlier. This time of year, shade can be extremely important. Like you can get on a pattern of just running shade lines, fishing docks like that. For smallmouth, it's kind of an underrated thing. And maybe we just don't think about it as that, but cabbage that time of year, which is a really tall grass, it'll grow 10, 12 feet tall. That's, to me, if I can find that in the post spawn, that's the number one type of vegetation smallmouth get on. And it's cover for them, but I really think it's the shade from the tall plant that they just like getting in that shade. So, always think shade if you can as well. And with smallmouth, not just largemouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, like sitting back and rethinking post spawn and how it happens here at the mouth of like the Niagara River in Buffalo. We do have an insane spawning flat that they spawn on, and it'll go from like no grass on it at all at the beginning of June to the 4th week of June. It's all cabbage flatted out, and you can catch them there through the 2nd week of July in like 6 foot of water. But there's like 2 to 4 mile an hour current washing over top of it as well.
Okay.
So it does make sense.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot of times when they're sitting in that, they're not sitting on the bottom. They're kind of like hovering in the grass. Mm-hmm. And I think they just want something over their eyes. Bass don't have eyelids. So they want to put something right here so they're not having to have the sun on their face all day.
Right. Yeah, and this conversation here, Joe made the point. It's very percentage triangle type talk, and this is more because Joe is a fanatic of Mr. Brandon Polnick and his whole triangle theory. But it's true, and it can definitely be efficient. One thing that I tried doing last year, and it might honestly sound crazy, so feel free to call me crazy. But what I do is when I think that they're when I know that they're off the bed and starting to move post spawn, I will go back to where I found them spawning, and literally, looking at a map and also visual cues, will look out towards the lake and try to almost picture like a topographic, like almost visually, like in 3D, in my head. It sounds crazy when I say that, but you kind of use it as like, where's the first stopping place for me to go? And that almost gives you just kind of a green light to say, hey, step one, check here. It can almost start giving you breadcrumbs of where they're going to be. It helped me last year find them post spawn really fast. I mean, that might be kind of crazy to think about, trying to picture your topographic up and where they might go first, but kind of trying to put some picture to simple-minded folks like me that like, books with pictures versus words.
Hey, I'm not going to argue your success the last year, so I'm all for it.
I don't know. I haven't had a lot of success. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
I don't. Yeah, we won't get into that. So the difference between it, I think this conversation could be completely different because, I shouldn't say different, but can change when we talk of smallmouth versus largemouth, because largemouth are not going to go nearly as far as a smallmouth would. Now I know certain lakes, they can move much further, but majority of the time, a largemouth is not going to go that far.
Mm-mm.
Its whole life could be within 2 miles, if that.
It could be in one canal.
True. Yeah. So I mean, talking largemouth though, to kind of to put it in the realm of the entire country, because not everyone has smallmouth. When you're starting to put these things together, right? Post spawn, these fish are moving around, and you can't find them. Because it can be a tricky time of year. What are kind of like some of the, the quote unquote going back to basics? What are the first things you're doing? Like, what are some search baits that you use too, just to try to get one just to say hello, just to give you some sort of clue?
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's a fun thing to throw, but like this time of year, honestly, I'm throwing a lot of top water. I can cover water with it. It draws the fish out further than like I think a jig would. Like, you're going to get a fish to travel and bite more. And it's just something that triggers them that time of year. So I'm going with that. But like if I'm really, really struggling, I am, I'm going to kind of go towards, it's this time of year it's, it works, but it's kind of an all type of year thing. I'm going to obvious cover. I'm going to go fish like docks, bridges, riprap, stuff like that. And typically I'm going to downsize a little bit. I'm going like wacky stick baits, shaky head, drop shot, something to get bites. Someone to tell me there's fish in the area. And then once I locate some bass, maybe then I'll upsize back. If they're not the size that I want to catch, maybe then I'll upsize, go to like a swim bait, crank bait, chatter bait, something like that, to try to catch those bigger ones. But, it's important. You got to get around a fish, get around bass. Right. And generally with a spinning rod and obvious structure, you give yourself a good opportunity to get bites if you're around a population of some sort.
Mm-hmm. I think what's kind of crazy to see is, now that we have forward facing sonar, is that like when you're in that post spawn phase and say you go to a nearby, wherever that first stretch of milfoil is, or a rock pile or docks, and you can't find them on any of them, but you pan over into the middle of the abyss with forward facing sonar and they're just swimming around minding their own business, it kind of gives you almost a peace of mind that you're not as crazy or maybe not as bad as you think. That the fish do tend, even largemouth will get up and suspend and random stuff. I think even more so after they spawn.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy to see that. Like, you'll be fishing with a buddy and, you're fishing you're fishing target related stuff. And to your right is like the middle of the lake, but there's nothing out there. He'll bomb a wacky rig and just hook up to one randomly. And it'll be like 3 seconds. So, it's subsurface. And it's just kind of crazy. I mean, it's one of those situations. It's hard to, unless you have the technology, it's hard to stay on them.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's so hard. And the harder part is a lot of times, like, you will get bites doing that, but realistically, a fish drifting around and suspending is probably, going to be really hard to be catchable. And those, like, not to say like you should totally avoid those, but just because you're seeing them out there. You still probably want to fish for fish that are set up on a grass bed, because you know that fish is in there probably to feed and ambush or under a dock or something like that. So you kind of gotta, like, it's okay to know they're out there, but if you can't get them to bite, don't burn a whole day, going after those. Still try to fish in those feeding zones, because that's obviously the fish we want to target.
Yeah, you end up chasing ghosts, as Andy likes to call it.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, they're not even ghosts anymore. You can see them down there. they're real. They just aren't biting.
Fair enough. No, it's crazy with largemouth. Like, one of the biggest things I do is, and I don't know how people feel about stuff, but I try to find fry garters. Like, if you can find bass that are guarding fry, they're probably going to eat. And the easiest way for me to do that is to burn a buzz bait. Just cover as much water as I can near that spawning flat to main lake points. And it's always the obvious docks near that main lake point where you get bit, because that's where the surplus of fry are. Wherever there's wind-driven current, whatever, they're fish. They move to that stuff. And I find that's where you get some of your biggest bites too. And it always seems to be on a black or white buzz bait for me post spawn. Always.
One thing I like to do to figure out if they're shallow too, especially if you have clear waters, and it's not really any intention. We've talked about this before, but like, not any intention on catching them, right? Is just throwing a big glide bait just to see if fish are actually there. Like, there's so many times you can go down a bank there where you don't see any fish, but there might be grass or boulder or something. You throw a big glide bait, and they all automatically just magically appear, like, out of nowhere. And you're like, oh, there is fish here. I just suck. I can't catch it. It's just kind of one of those. Which we learned from Milliken when we had him on, is he can even do that same concept over deeper water if it's clear with forward-facing sonar. Is you might not be catching them, but let them rise up, and you're like, oh, okay, they are here. Because there's definitely times, I mean, Garrett, you could definitely touch on it, where forward-facing sonar, you think there's nothing on the bottom, and you just throw a bait, and they just rise out of the bottom as if they came from underground.
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, the technology is amazing, and I would say, probably more so when it's colder. It is not a show off. Like, it's not like you're going to see everything. Like, I was literally, I've been on St. Clair, a lot the last couple of weeks. I had a day where I caught 130, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. I saw 3 fish on forward sonar all day. Once we caught one, like, of course you see them coming in,
right?
But I saw literally 3 fish running around, and I would just, I'd see some rock piles and I'd throw it in there, and there'd be 15 fish sitting in there, but they sit so tight that you can't see them. So you can't just get, it's an awesome tool, but you cannot just like ignore things that you aren't seeing with it. It's not going to show 100% everything. It's just not. There's a lot of fish that you won't see with side imaging, you won't see with down imaging, forward sonar. You just have to still, do it the old school way and throw your bait out there and try to catch them. I mean, it is what it is.
There are simple things you can do, though, with like 2D, at least because I run Lowrance, unfortunately, on my boat. And I know Bailey kind of gets on me at first sometimes, but I can zoom in 7 times on 2D and down imaging. And when I'm on Lake Erie in 40 foot of water, I can just zoom into like the bottom 7 feet. And I can tell the difference between bottom fish and a rock, because you'll get like that little sliver and little red and blue. And I'm like, that's fish. And you can usually catch it that way. And it's just something that you can add into your arsenal with electronics. I don't think you can't do that with Helix, but you can zoom in really close with Solixes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be another way to like amplify your sonar settings, is to zoom in very closely to in your 2D and down imaging to see those deeper fish if they're laying on the bottom.
Yeah, I think that is what.
No, just saying you get on me about running Lowrance.
Oh, I mean, yeah, as I'm going to. No, it's. I think that doing that is important. Can be really good, especially in the colder temps. But I think like now, and like after, especially post spawn, right? You probably don't want to be running that 2D so zoomed in, because like you've done it before, Andy, on the Great Lakes, where you're in 40 foot of water and you drop on one that's sitting 35 feet up and it follows you all the way down to the bottom, but you never would have seen it if you were zoomed in.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah, interesting.
I agree, but like there are certain situations post spawn, like right
Yeah.
after the post spawn, where they get out there and they just lay right back in that bottom again because it's the most shady spot for them. So like I'll give a little tidbit away. Out here in eastern end of Lake Erie, we have a ton of sand flats, and the smallies will literally sit in the waves of the sand. And if you have your 2D on, like zoomed out, you can't see them. But if you zoom in as you go over the riffles, you'll actually see them sitting in the divots in the sand. You'd be like, oh yeah,
That's pretty
that's
cool.
a fish. Yeah. So
Apparently, we have a comment here from Jonathan that says, Garrett, you and I look alike. I'm going to take that as an insult.
Oh,
especially at the smolder that everybody missed pregame.
You should probably take that as an insult with my Amish beard I have right now that I really need to get rid of. We have a comment here from Ryan Hartman that says, Andy, get that Mega 360, change your life on Erie.
He is not lying.
I've been telling him.
I do want to get 360. I do love my Lowrance stuff too. Like if I could have the optimal setup, I would have 2 HDS lives and probably a Solix 10 or 12 running 360 that I could switch back from 360 and live.
Or here's a better solution. You go all Solixes, so you start seeing all the boulders you can't see with Lowrance, and you can have 360 and live on the front.
Maybe on the next boat.
He has nothing to come back with. Garrett's just sitting back there like,
I'm not going to comment.
You know what I could say, Bailey? If you buy them for me, I'll put them on my boat, okay? Like, I don't have all the money in the world.
Yeah, I don't have money either, buddy. I got a truck
exactly.
payment now.
Yeah. You got a big boy vehicle now.
Something like that. So here's kind of an interesting question. This stems off of a comment here from Gio talking about bottom composition. And so in the pre-spawn, like right now, people joke and they call it, KVD season because everyone's catching fish everywhere in the lake, regardless of where you are, basically. But in the post-spawn, it seems like there's definitely condensed areas where these fish are. How much do you guys think that bottom composition plays into that? Or is it just a simple of the cover's there and they have access to food? Like, I'm sure obviously there's different variables that play into it, but where do you think bottom composition plays into the post-spawn?
I mean, if you have a lake where it changes a lot, I think it plays a ton. I think it always plays. If I'm on like typically reservoirs, you got a lot of different changes. You got, you have silty bottom areas and you have like hard bottom points or a hard bottom bay, whatever it is. I'm always going to look for hard bottom. Bass just like hard bottom for the most part. And same thing goes for this time of year. So I'm not saying it's 100% of the time they're going to be on the hard bottom stuff, but if I got a creek and I know one side in is hard bottom and one side is soft bottom and they both have brush piles, I'm going to assume the hard bottom brush piles are going to hold the fish. Like that's statistically, those are your better chances to catch fish. It just always is. Bass are just naturally attracted to the harder bottom stuff. It's easier for them to feed off of. They don't have to stick their nose in the mud if they're going to trap something down there. They like that clean bottom.
Especially, I think it's more of an emphasis when you're fishing grass too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the grass that they like, for the most part, whether that's hydrilla or milfoil, it doesn't usually grow in like nasty muck. It grows on like a sandy bottom or a harder type of silt. I don't know the names of all the dirt, but typically the bottom of the grass that fish live in are a little bit of a more firm bottom than the rest of the lake.
Yeah, you said firm bottom. Sorry, I had to.
Everybody likes a firm bottom if you can, if it's available.
That's right. Even a small
big if there.
Yeah. Andy, anything to add on that?
Oh, I mean, vegetation and bottom, and I'm like up to 2 years ago, I was terrible with it. I couldn't tell coontail from milfoil. Now I think I have it pretty much dialed. But I mean, post-spawn fish, when it comes to grass up here, I feel like they relate to it less than we think they do, just because a lot of our lakes are so natural, and in smallmouth we don't have all that much grass really to deal with besides like the cabbage and the stringy eelgrass that we'll have in some of our rivers. But yeah, like uh,
Do you guys get bit in cabbage? I hate cabbage.
only smallmouth.
Oh, dude, you gotta start fishing cabbage.
I hate cabbage. Like I try to
You
fish
gotta fish that.
cabbage
You gotta
on-
fish that cabbage edges, man. Biggest smallmouth in your early summer time. Cabbage edges. Hard to catch,
This
but
is probably my problem because I think my problem with cabbage is because I don't fish it much because I don't have a lot of it near me. But like Oneida's got some cabbage.
mhm.
I think the problem is I'm looking at cabbage like I look at milfoil where I look for the clumps that are condensed. Is that the problem? Is I'm fishing it like that versus fishing it like looking for the grass lines?
Yeah, like so cabbage. Generally with cabbage, you're always gonna find a hard edge. Usually, deeper edges are generally better, but it can be a shallow edge. But yeah, you normally just go down the line of cabbage, and fish like we were talking about that. I think they're there. Yeah, it's cover for them, but I think shade is a big part of it. So I think it's actually easy to fish, to drag something below them and not get bit. Like you can literally just go down that with a top water, go down it with a swim bait, a jerk bait, and if you don't catch them, they're going to come out and follow it, and they're going to show themselves. And there might be like a little turn in there or a point, but now if you're on a smallmouth lake and it has cabbage, I mean, I'm speaking like New York is like prime for this. Champlain, Oneida. It's not necessarily that there's going to be fish in every edge, but if you figure out that bite, it's your biggest smallmouth in the lake. That's how you win tournaments.
Yeah, what I find one of the biggest baits for me used to be in the past when I did it more was a spy bait. Like if you just got right on that cabbage edge and you slowly rolled the spy bait, if you had any chunk rock on that hard edge, that's where your bites would come from, and you could literally pattern that up and down that edge. Where I fish it in Lake Erie, there's a couple rock piles, and all the fish will literally sit on those 4 or 5 rock piles underneath that cabbage where it like flows with the current.
Yeah, that's textbook.
Interesting. Okay, noted. Stop hating cabbage. Okay.
Stop hating.
Yeah, and then the other things too, like you'll find if you get up on top of it, you'll get pockets where you have rock or like gravel bottom or like chunk rock, and they'll sit in those pockets as well, and you can catch them more on bottom style baits.
Okay. So with this postpawn talk, I think we've covered, almost all of our bases here and really gone in depth. But I think it's one thing we should touch on quick because it's completely different and it's unique is ledge fishing. And I think that's something you're pretty dang good at, Garrett. When those fish are getting up to spawn, I think obviously the TVA is a completely different beast. But after those fish are spawning, what are some, like, in the same scenario we have, like, what are the first things you're going to look for? And obviously you have your fish that are going to remain in those creeks, those fish that are going to remain on shallow cover. And sure, there's ledges in those creeks, but talking main river stuff, is it just you just need to go graph as much as you can, or is there a process to finding those on ledges?
Yeah, so when they first come out, they're going to come out of the creek, right? Mm-hmm. So my first earliest ledges, if I'm not speaking about, I'm going to scan around in the creek, look at those ledges, whatever. But they're going to, for a couple weeks after when they get out there, they're going to be where the creek channel meets the main river. You're going to see on your graph, there's going to be a T, whatever. It's going to make there's a nice ledge where the current's hitting the lip. Those are, they're easy to find. And I'm just going to go and literally scan all of those. And usually once you start finding some fish on one of those, not saying they're going to be on the whole lake because the northern part of the lake may be cooler or warmer, same with the southern because those places, they're 100 miles long. But generally in that area where you find them, where the creek mouth hits the main river, or the creek channel hits the main river channel, you can find them on a lot of those similar areas in there. So that's your first, ledge that they're going to get into in the main river. And then after they stay there for a little bit, then they're just going to start kind of drifting down the main river. So then you got to actually scan, the river part. You just got to get down it and go for miles and miles and miles until you find that school of fish. But when they first get out there, look for those intersections. They're just going to follow their creek channel out and stop right on the main river. And that's, to me, that's the easiest because you have the best idea where they're going to be. And it's, it only takes 2 or 3 minutes to look over that and see if they're down there. And honestly, like if you don't have, or you're not comfortable with graphing, as long as you have like a GPS or an app on your phone where you can see where that is. I mean, it's nothing. Just pull up there and throw a crankbait across it. Where the current's hitting, the top of the ledge on the main riverside, just throw a deep crankbait on that or drag a football jig, and you can find them like that. You don't have to scan and find these fish when they're out there. I mean, just pull up there, fish for a little bit, and move on if that's what you want to do. But that's the area they stop first every time.
When they're real quick, Andy, because I know you want to say something. When they're coming out of the creeks, right? In these creeks, they swing both directions to the main river. Do you find that they're more on, say, the current's coming this way? Do you find that they're more on the ones that get the currents hitting them versus the one that has that current break? So,
let me do a visual. So it'll be, it's just hard to explain. So yeah, here's your, okay, not bad visual. Yeah, so let's say
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah. Okay, so the current's coming. The current's coming down. There's a channel right here, right? The creek channel is coming out, and you have main river on both sides. It's going to be where the current's actually hitting into it. So the current's going to roll off of one, or it's going to roll off of the ledge, go down to the creek channel, and then come back up on top of that ledge. Where it comes back up is where those fish are going to sit most of the time. They want to be in the most current. My truck just shut off actually. Yeah, so wherever the current's hitting the most, which is, it's kind of opposite, traditional thinking. Traditionally, you want it to be like where there's a current eddy or something, the current's coming over and it's creating slack water. On the TVA, you want to be where the current's absolutely pounding it.
And now that was going to be my question, is how much does current dictate it? But basically, from being like a stream fisherman, having a stream fisherman's background, when you have like that lip and that current's rolling over, however it's coming north to south or south to north, I would think one of those ledges might be just slightly higher than the other. And when that current comes across and comes up and hits, I think the main reason why those fish are going to be there is because when that current comes down and hits, it's still going to make an underwater eddy that you don't see.
Yeah,
and
really
that's why
tight.
those fish are there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all they have to do is just pop up a foot, feed, come back down.
Yeah, because they have a soft pocket where that current is meeting the current that comes across the top of the water. So there's always surface level current and then there's underwater current. So it's coming down and it's coming up and it's hitting that surface current, and you'll see like a pocket, probably like an eddy almost, if the current's really rolling, and that's where the fish would be sitting. It's almost typical like river creek fishing, just in a bigger setting. And you have to have the proper bottom composition for them to sit there as well. So if there's like shell or rock, I'm assuming. I know nothing about ledge fishing. Yeah. I'm just going off of like my knowledge of current and how current functions when it rolls over things. So that would make sense as to why they're sitting there, because it just creates an air pocket for them, an eddy pocket, that's soft water.
Yeah, and then typically, like you talk about bottom composition, if there's current rolling over something, typically the bottom is not going to be mud. It's going to be it's going to be a firm bottom, which everybody loves. And then a lot of shell beds will form in those areas because obviously they like to filter the water. So they're going to be in an area where current's going to bring them nutrients and whatever they filter to filter.
Yeah.
It's such a unique style of fishing. I love it. But
yeah, I'm addicted to it.
Challenging. Addicted. Yeah. I can't wait for our ledge episode we're going to do coming up, and just nailing down, I think, the most important part about it, and that's just straight up boat positioning and how to make your right cast, like how to make the right cast. Because I think there's people that just approach it like from, I'm just going to cast there from wherever I'm positioned, when it's like, I was watching today a Justin Lucas video of him on Chickamauga last year, and how it's like, it's got to be this cast. If it's not this cast, I'm not going to get bit. There's 100 fish there, but if I'm, completely a different angle, they're not going to eat. It was kind of crazy to think. I don't know. It's super unique. I love stuff like, it's so frustrating when that's the case, but when you figure it out, it's so satisfying.
Yeah. But the thing is you figured this out in a different sense. Like, it's the same thing when you fish St. Lawrence or any place with current. Fish and current aren't as keyed in on like what bait you're throwing or what color it is as the way it's moving through the water. That's how they determine if things are natural to them to where they want to eat them, or if it's fake. Like you can throw too heavy of a drop shot weight in the St. Lawrence when you're drifting. It'll just keep sticking to the bottom. They won't bite it. If you throw too light of a weight, it flies through the water. They don't bite it. If you throw the right weight, it feels like your bait is like moving with the water and you almost don't even feel it. That's when you get bites. And it's similar in ledge fishing. Your bait has to come through the right direction. It can't be too heavy, can't be too light. But when all that comes together, that's what makes those fish think that that's an actual meal, and that's how you get them to bite. And it is addicting, man. I love like trying to think about all those little things about how to present the bait, because it's a way to definitely get a one up on someone that might have just fished that school 20 minutes ago and never got a bite.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question when it comes to proper bait presentation on these ledges, because I am completely foreign to it. Is there a lot of bait fish that will show up on these ledges with these fish as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I don't live in Alabama or anything, so like I haven't thrown ledge fishing. But yeah, there's definitely bait fish. Like to me, there will always, I don't want to say there will be always, but like if the bass are there, it doesn't necessarily mean the bait fish is there. Or the same, like you might find some ledges that are full of bait and there's no bass with them. But when you have bass there and you see bait in the area, it's almost guaranteed it's going to be on. Like it just, once they see that shad is running around, they're thinking it's time to feed. And like, that's the best thing you can see. Like, especially with live sonar now, if you're sitting there fishing and like you look up 100 yards and you see, oh man, here comes a school of bait. Like you're almost better off not casting, letting that bait just continue its way down. And then when it all meets, start throwing in there and the feeding frenzy's on. Yeah. So, generally, like if they're together, it's feeding time.
It sounds like it almost wouldn't matter what direction you're casting from if the bait and bass are there together. It's just more particular if there's no bait around.
For sure, yeah. When there's no bait, yeah. When there's no bait, your job, you got to trick them. When the bait's there, it's easy, and everybody can capitalize on them.
And that's when you get the 20 boats on one school on a ledge.
Mm-hmm.
Or 100.
Yeah, your bumper cars. They're bumper boats, I should say, really.
Yeah, it's funny. Those days, like everyone's so worried about forward sonar and it's going to ruin our fisheries. Guys forget that when side imaging came out, there was schools of bass that were half a mile long. And now the fish are in, 8 to 10 fish schools, a big school. Like Mother Nature will adapt and protect itself. And it's going to be the exact same with this. It's always changing. And, we always have to change with it. Like those days of those giant schools, like there might be some of that, but the fish are just like, they're not going to go out there and just go and get slaughtered. They adapt and they change. And it's crazy to see.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad. The good days are over.
I know we missed out on that.
Poor
kids are over. 10 years they're just somewhere else. They're just somewhere else. And then as soon as somebody finds it, everybody will follow the next new hot trend, and then your mega schools will show up again. More than likely.
I mean, that whole concept's a show in itself, talking about how popular offshore has gotten and how the shallow bite is benefiting because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, directly to Garrett's point, I mean, these fish they're dumb, but they're not that dumb. Like, they know when they're getting a jig knocked on their forehead to say, hey, I probably shouldn't hang here very long. They know when to move. But,
do they go shallower or do they go even deeper? Like, I believe fish go even deeper and we don't even realize it. So
one of our local lakes, I caught a largemouth in 52 feet of water on a drop shot on the bottom. Thought it was a smallmouth.
That's deep for a largemouth.
Yeah.
Super deep.
Yeah, I was like, are you lost? Like, there ain't nothing here.
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah, it was a school of them. They're blowing up on small perch. It was kind of crazy. But dude, we seriously appreciate you taking the time to come on here and drop some knowledge on us.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Always got to see here. But
long overdue.
It is. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Do you guys want to see that bait one more time? Spro EPOP 80.
Hashtag sponsor.
I haven't seen the comment section, but I imagine it's going crazy. Want to see this bait one more time?
Yeah, there's
Spro
about 1,000
EPOP 80.
I wish it was on Omnia. Otherwise, I'd plug it or share screen it. But it's not on Omnia Fishing. But I will get some of those. And I know Andy's probably already bought a few. He's probably already has them in his house.
I wish I could. I think every one of my debit and credit cards got hacked while I was in Florida. So I am like, yeah, it was fun.
It's probably from all those strip clubs you went to.
Oh yeah, I was in
Yeah.
bed at like 8:00 every night.
Yeah. That sucks. I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, it's fine.
I'm sure
So-
Omnia hates hearing that because of your weekly tackle order that you're not putting in.
Oh, I haven't put a tackle. Well, I did put one in recently, but
That's
I
right.
actually have one. I have one that I've been slowly building on. That I'm like, I need this, I need that.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
Well, either way, Garrett, what's coming up next for you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm actually. This is kind of weird. I almost have like the summer off. Been doing a lot of guiding on Lake St. Clair. If you guys want to get out, get a hold of me. We've been crushing them up here. But I got some local tournaments. To fish around the house, like some bigger stake tournaments, $7,000-$10,000 first place deals, and then I got my next tournament. Major tournament will be Bass Open on Oneida in July, and then my next one after that will be a Bass Open on Upper Bay in September. So aside from 1 week, I am home all the summer, which this will probably be the first summer since like 2016 that's happened. So I'm not, I don't know. It'll be nice. I mean, I love the weather here in Michigan, and it'll be nice to kind of like just be home and play around and learn new things. You talked about the glide bait earlier. That's one thing on my list. I want to learn some of the Japanese techniques. I'm going to have a pretty good opportunity here coming up to relax for once and just fish and have fun and try new things.
So what you're
Enjoy.
saying is I'm gonna come fishing.
Yeah, you better get up here.
All right, I'm coming. I'll be there tomorrow.
All right. Come like in 2 weeks. I'm busy.
I'm busy. Oh, that's funny. Well, dude, for folks tuning in and folks listening to this at a later date, all Garrett's social medias is posted down in the show description, so you guys can go give him a follow and keep up. He puts out some pretty badass content. I'm a personal big fan of the Humminbird screenshots with his settings that he puts for each of them. Actually, it's really a great educational tool. I think those posts when people take them and actually look at the different, contrast and all that jazz that you're using and why you're using it. And that could be a whole show in itself of me asking you questions on those. But for real, thank you for joining us tonight, and hopefully get you back on here real soon, man.
Yeah, we'll do it. I appreciate it, guys. As always, it's always fun.
Heck yeah. All right, buddy. We will talk to you soon.
We'll see you.
All right, see you, Garrett. Oh, man, I always love having these, like, they're not straight up technology conversations, but like conversations that technology plays into. It's one of those things where I have to I get so consumed with electronics that I have to go out or make a few trips every now and then to not bring the graphs and force myself to make sure the fisherman's instincts are still being, worked on, developed, all that jazz. Make sure they're still here. I'm not too busy staring at a screen.
I think the Postspawn is my favorite time to put the trolling motor on 65 and just cover a ton of water. And then as soon as you find one, slow down, pick it apart. And then as soon as you wear that school apart, right back to 65. But it's very important to have an understanding of what the bottom contours of your lake looks like, because 90% of the lake in the Postspawn won't have fish, or 95%.
I think the majority of your success in the Postspawn is done at ice out or when that grass is gone late fall, and you could spend that time graphing.
Yeah. Oh,
and a lot of people don't like to talk about that because people are doing it, and those are the people that are winning tournaments in the summer.
Yeah. I mean, when I went out fun fishing before I really started guiding here a lot, and in the next 2 weeks, I'm probably going to get maybe 2 to 4 more days where I'm able to go out and put in a lot of time graphing. I put probably almost 55 hours on my motor in the last 4 weeks, because when I've been out fun fishing, I've graphed for 90% of the time I'm on the water. So I'm like, I know I can catch fish. I'm not worried about that. It's learning new spots and trying to understand where these fish are going to go in the summertime from the spawning flats, because a contour map will only tell you so much. And usually by the time I get to a lot of these lakes that we fish in the summer, it's the summertime. So that was one of the most important things I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I probably put 300 waypoints on 3 of the lakes we fish, a lot in the summer. So it's going to be a good time. I can't wait for summer.
Yeah, but I want to go catch a couple big hens off a bed.
Yeah, that's coming next week. I really think the smallies are going to be on bed by the end of the week.
For Great Lakes you're talking?
Yeah, and a lot of the inland lakes too. I bet you there's
inland lakes. They're already there. They're already on beds. I mean,
Oh.
I'm pretty sure it's supposed to thunderstorm this weekend for my tournament, but if knowing New York, it'll change in like 2 hours. But either way, if it is any sort of clear or flat calm or some sort of deal, I will be catching them off beds some way or another this weekend. Either way, this weekend's going to be interesting because it's a lake that's pretty small and they're probably going to be spawning. I don't think the green ones will be spawning just yet. I'm going to go look to see if they are. But, I mean, it's one of those times of year where the random jabroni with a wacky rig fan casting shallow has
we'll
the same
catch like
amount
105 inches.
Yeah, they'll have the same chance to win as you. Now, granted, if you put your time in and practice, like Friday, I'm going to go up in the evening, try to spend a couple hours in the lake before it gets dark to like see if they are on beds, kind of get a feel for what's going on, maybe dot a few. But beyond that, I mean, if we're just talking like if it's going to be cloudy and overcast and it's hard to really get up shallow and go look for them, like your jabroni with a wacky rig has just as good a chance of winning as you do. I mean, less of a chance than a 5-fish that we're at now, but like a few years ago, our local trail in Cape was a 3-fish tournament. Like it's hard to win those suckers. Like 3 fish,
especially if you get 319 and a half throwing a wacky rig, like
you got all day to catch 3 fish. Like,
yeah.
But either way, it's regardless, it's a good group of guys, and I'm always excited to see them and fish against them. And you're always joking with some people when you see on the water, like Forrest. I try to bother him as much as possible if I see him on the water on tournament days.
Me too. Me too.
No, I'm just kidding. We don't bother each other. Actually, it's just fun. Either way, kayak tournament coming up this weekend. A lot of kayak videos coming to the Be the Fish YouTube channel. Actually, episode 3 of Chasing Hardware was posted last night. That is down in the show description if people want to go check it out. And the tournament video is coming next Monday night, so people can look forward to that. Which we have more tournament video. We have a bunch of tournament videos coming up on that channel, and Andy's going to be plugging away at his channel over there, full of fishing.
If I ever get time.
Yeah. What would be great? What I was talking to Lan last night, and I was like, if I could have one superpower ever, it would be I wouldn't have to ever sleep. You know how much more productive, how much more of your life you'd get?
Yeah. That's the one. That's probably like the greatest thing about the fishing life, right? Like every morning,
you have no sleep.
Well, yeah, but every morning I'm up at like 5:15 or 5 or 4:30. I get to see a sunrise, and I go to bed after the sun sets. I get a full day. It's just I get up, I get on the water, I come home, I grab my daughter, I spend time with my daughter, and then my wife, because I don't get to see them ever because on my days off are usually days that they're working. So it takes a lot there. And then by the time 9 o'clock comes around, I'm ready to fall asleep. So
dude, I'm the same way with that, except I can't sleep. I can't sleep unless it's like past 11 o'clock. My body's just trained that way, unfortunately. But it's also trained where it wakes me up at 6. But dude, if I wake up past 7:30 or like say 8 o'clock,
my day's ruined. I'm miserable.
Dude, I'm pissed. Yeah, I just whereas like my fiance, she'll sleep until 10:30, and I'm like, are you insane? Like, you just wasted half your day. Yeah. Where I'm up as early as I can, obviously if I'm up late at night, you want to actually sleep. But yeah, we can go on a whole tangent about that. But either way, what do you got coming up? Any tournaments? You said you're fishing at 2-3 tournaments this year?
Yeah. Well, I got to register us for that cash-in derby.
Oh, right.
That's one big thing. I got a ghost coming in that I'm going to install on my boat on Friday. Finally going to have spot lock, so I'm pretty pumped about that. I know. I've been trying to get Ultrex for 2 years, and
2 years.
Back order. Yeah, I've been trying to get one for 2 years. When I bought my boat, it was the start of COVID, and they've been back stocked since then. So it's actually 3 years. And when they come into stock, I'm not in a position to buy one because something came up, so I had to wait, and then they go back ordered. So
something came up, as in your massive Omnia fishing order.
always needing tackle or gas. And now that gas is $4.80 a gallon, that really puts a damper on everything.
Good gosh.
I put gas in my boat yesterday, and it has a 41-gallon tank, and I put 30 gallons in, and I almost cried. So, yeah.
Yikes.
I was like, I had the Michael Jordan face going at the gas.
Oh, no.
It's getting over $100. I'm like, what? I was like, last year it cost me $100 to fill it from E to full. I'm like, this sucks.
Oh man. So now that you're getting a ghost, can I put the 4-checks in the Hobie?
That'd be wild.
Wouldn't it be?
Honestly,
I
after
put the
today,
my lap and just like use my.
I'll be surprised if my 4-checks makes it like another like 20 hours on the water after today. I think I rammed it into every tree and stump that there was because the water was so low where we were fishing.
Smooth.
But dude, you should have saw my transducer was like almost on top of my trolling motor. I hit a stump so hard.
I can see the bottom, but why does it say I'm in 45 feet?
Yeah, pretty much. I was like, it's only 3 foot here, and it says I'm in 24 and a half.
Yikes.
Yeah. So I pulled it up, and I was like, watch this, and I just like slapped it back into position. I was like, we're good.
Good gosh.
So, but yeah, I got 2 more guide trips until the ghost gets here, and then I got a weekend packed. I unfortunately had a few days get canceled or rescheduled later in the summer, so I had a few days open up on the next 2 weeks. But yeah, that'd be really hard. Like, but I don't even know if I'm gonna push to book them at this point because I'm very transparent. The fishing's tough right now. I went from like really, really good to extremely tough in 3 days.
Could do inland lakes. Could do spawn classes.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to charge more because it's cost me $200 to fill my truck and boat when I want to go out there. Like, it's not.
People are willing to pay it. People are willing to pay it. I mean,
that is true. So we'll see.
Money, money, money.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, maybe I'll throw that out there. Like, if anybody wants to go inland lake spawn snatching, let's go.
Heck yeah.
So,
well, dude, anything to tell the folks before we sign off here? Lake Chickamauga, or I keep saying Chickamauga, Lake Fork preview show, fantasy fishing show
Thursday.
This Thursday. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Deacon's being a loser, and going to fish a Thursday nighter instead of hanging out with us. But Andy, Bart, and I will be on for fantasy fishing. So if you guys want to tune in Thursday night and win some prizes,
I might be late to that, like I said, because
Andy's going to be a loser, and is going to.
I might be late. I might be late. So yeah, it's been a really, really rough start to 2022 for the full household.
If people only knew. Yeah. You guys are troopers though, because you guys are still the happiest people I think I've met. So when you have coffee, when you have your coffee, you're the happiest person I've met.
Hey, like if I'm coffeeless, watch out. Like I am a bull in a china shop. Like let's.
He is a wreck.
All kidding aside, I am always a bull in the china shop. I'll openly admit that. So if there's something breakable around, I will break it.
Without coffee, you're just like that drunk guy in the street that's stumbling everywhere, but you get a sip of caffeine and you're like still a crackhead, but like you're just a little bit more dialed.
Yeah. It's like, oh. Don't get me started right now, boy.
Boy, oh. All right, folks. We appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll see you guys on Thursday night for the Lake Fork Fantasy Fishing Preview Show. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you then.